of the Ad Podcast. We've got a great guest for you guys today. Joel Halpern is the Chief Marketing Officer of Morningside Brands. Joel is a seasoned brand strategist, creative director, and marketing executive with over 20 years of experience building multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground up. As CMO of Morningside Brands, he leads global marketing and brand positioning for a high-end portfolio of international and spirits, including Alma del Jaguar Tequila. Joel is known for his ability to scale startups rapidly. In a recent tenure of CMO for the CTV app platform Vibe, he helped grow the business from 0 to $1 million in monthly recurring revenue. He was an agency founder from 2012. He co-led Loaded for Bear, an award-winning brand development firm. He led strategy and biz dev for over 100 global clients across diverse sectors before moving into specialized consultancy. Joel has a unique specialty in transatlantic branding. He spent years as a partner in Paris-based consultancy, specifically helping out European companies successfully enter and scale in the US market. He was also the co-founder and CMO of Mutistic, a music technology company that revolutionized remote recording collaboration. His background also includes rebranding television stations ABC, CW, and Fox, and driving global growth for St. Blues Guitar Company. Having graduated from the Memphis College of Art, Joel approaches marketing as a marriage between high-level design and psychological consumer insights. He believes that exceptional brands enhance human experiences. He's a frequent mentor for the Global Accelerator Network and has served as a guest lecturer at the Yale School of Management and Sciences in Paris. Joel, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation. That's quite the intro.
Yeah, let's go. So I know I gave a little bit of cliff notes there, but would you mind taking us back, telling us a little bit about your origin story? Where'd you grow up? What'd you study? And how'd you get involved in the marketing, agency, branding world?
Sure. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Went to a big public high school, found art pretty early there, and got a full ride to Memphis College of Art, which was a great small art school. Really wanted to go to University of Montana, but this was back in the day when they were sending letters in the mail, and I was in Europe with some friends, and my mom didn't respond in time to the letter. And, I called her and I was like, did a letter come? And she said no. And so ended up going to MCA, which ultimately ended up being a really great experience because while it didn't necessarily, give me a lot more art skills, what it did was, give me a skill that later I realized was the most valuable in marketing, which was creating something, put it on a wall in front of people that don't want to look at it, and convince them that it's worth their time. The critique is the big part of art school. Fast forward, a few years, my last year there, my last semester is sort of a free form time. It's like work on a single project, and I was wanted to build a guitar. I was like, well, there's no jobs waiting on me at the end of art school. There's not there's no McKinsey recruiting from an art college. So I was like, I'm gonna look at being a luthier. I think it's pretty interesting. I always loved working with wood. Growing up in the South, I spent my summers at my grandfather's farm in Mississippi, like with him in the shop. So I figured, hey, this could be a thing. Was in a guitar shop, looking at the inside of a guitar that I could not afford, and seeing how it was constructed. And a little guy comes up to me and he says, hey, man, what are you doing? I was explaining the project. He said, well, we have a guitar company, in this building, if you want to come help us build guitars a couple days a week. So I was like, awesome.
That's awesome.
Like, hell yeah. It was my last semester of college, and why not? That's like pretty cool. And went in. About a month later, the owner came in, the guy that had kind of resurrected this brand, and said, you're too smart to be putting pickups in these guitars, but would you like to do sales and marketing? And I said, sure. What's sales and marketing? And it was sort of like boot camp for me. Very complicated industry. I was very young, knew nothing about it. Complicated in the industry because there are 3 legacy brands. Nobody dreams of playing an off brand as a child. So we went after, we sort of reinvented the company and scaled it pretty well. Left there, moved to New York, did music marketing, another very cool experience, another very complicated industry. no money, and went into real estate marketing and selling very high end units, 20 million plus apartments. I was 23 years old, so I was supporting agents on the marketing of that. Another complicated, I don't know why I kept putting myself in these complicated jobs, unqualified age. But what was cool was, trying to identify on the planet at any given time, there's like 10 buyers, right? So how do you market to 10 people across the globe? And so I learned a lot there. And then September 2008 happened, and everybody lost their job in the city. I was lucky to get offered a job at a qualitative and quantitative research group in Connecticut, which gave me immense data experience, old school data, really learning how, that consumer data can inform future decisions, predictive data, all that kind of stuff. That was filled with all these brilliant people. And we were working with brands like Kraft, McDonald's, et cetera. And I was sort of thrust into the CMO role of that group, so positioning us to these pretty major corporations. And that was fantastic. That was there for just over a year, but really dove in, really fell in love with data, analog data, I would call it. And again, 2008, the economy caught up with them. Clients started to pull back on some of those research projects. And I got invited to a job back in my hometown at Newport Television, which owned about 40 television stations and radio stations across the country and countless websites. And I went into a creative director job there, where I oversaw all the creative services for all those stations. There were CWs, ABCs, and we did all these rebrands. They were later sold to Sinclair. So I learned data. Then I went into this sort of television media world where I learned media, and firsthand, I kind of learned what a newsroom looked like when a press release came across. So I got kind of this very interesting marketing education in the real world. They were being sold, and it was like corporate media, local media guys came in. They saw a 26-year-old kid. And the guy looked at me across the table. This is before the acquisition. He says, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I don't want to be like you." In the president of the station, she's not like this guy. He looks at me and she starts laughing. And so I called some buddies that had gone to ad school, and I said, "Hey, there's a market here. We're all from Memphis. There is a need for a really cool creative agency here." Invited, pinged them, and they were kind of into the idea of coming back to Memphis and starting a boutique firm. We did Loaded for Bear. That was in 2012. Very successful. We grew with one $3,000 client to, by the time I left in 2017, we were working with clients all across the world. We had built huge real estate development projects. We had worked in pretty much every sector you could name, staffed up. And that was a really fascinating experience for me. Still, one of my most prized roles I've ever had. Left, moved to France. I'd been invited to speak at a conference there, and moved to France and met an American guy who was helping move companies to the US from France, VC-backed companies. Started working with him a lot. Moved over to join his firm as a partner. He filed for bankruptcy 3 months later. Went to be chief marketing officer for the Paris region. So that's like the state, Ile-de-France over here. And so our job was tourism and business development, moving businesses to the Paris region. A lot of bureaucracy there. And then, fast forward, met the guys from Vibe, which are a thriving CTV platform now, probably one of the leading self-service CTV platforms. Great founders, great team. Started at the infancy of that group in 2020. Grew them pretty far. We grew from nothing to, we were doing around 6 million MRR. And then I saw that my buddy Macaulay had started this tequila company on Instagram, and I was like, we're friends from back in Memphis. I'd worked on a project with him at Loaded for Bear, and I said, "What is this tequila thing? What are you doing? I'm kind of missing home, missing working projects like that. What's going on?" And played some phone tag, and I flew to Memphis and for Barbecue Fest, which is a huge barbecue cooking competition. We connected, and the rest is history. We joined in when we just had our tequila. We brought in our gin and just recently launched our bourbon.
That's amazing, man. Well, what a cool career. You're probably one of the rare CMOs that I've interviewed that has like a very distinct experience of like working within consumer brands, working within all these different verticals, but also within B2B. Do you think that sensibility, and then also leading an agency, do you think that varied experience of not kind of growing up in one sector or even one vertical, but kind of bouncing back and forth between a lot of different types of companies, both on the B2B side and the consumer side, does that give you a unique point of view as a CMO, do you think?
It does. I mean, particularly in the spirit space, because our customers are distributors.
Yeah.
And, I think my CEO and I always have this conversation. I always think about our end buyer, but at the same time, we have to, our real pitch is to distributors and to accounts. And, that's more of a numbers game, more of a classic kind of pitch. It's both a good thing and a bad thing. I have the experience and the knowledge to be able to easily pitch an account or pitch a distributor or understand what their pain points are, sort of massage our messaging to make sense for them. But there's a lot of fluff that they don't necessarily care about that is designed specifically for the end consumer, right? It's not necessarily fluff, but just more like the anecdotal things that, might drive a purchase versus bringing an actual product into an account or retail type setting where there are 40,000 other, things in a bottle. And so I think there's been benefit there for sure. There's in our industry, most of the CMOs have sort of grown up specifically in the spirits industry. And my thing I will always fall back on is that's incredibly sad, because if you don't have perspective, you're just working inside of a vacuum. And, I've come up with things, and we've had just sort of brainstorming sessions where it's like, oh yeah, well, there's always that side door, right? And, I'm one of those people, if someone says that's how you do it, or that's just how it's done, my stomach starts to hurt. I start to cry on the inside. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a smarter way.
So obviously with Alma del Jaguar, you guys have this give back initiative. What was it about the Jaguar protection? How did you see that was an interesting kind of a cause marketing effect that you guys could align with?
Yeah, so that was actually the origin of the brand. It was never it's not a greenwashing thing whatsoever. Macaulay Williams, our CEO, had a bourbon in Memphis called Blue Note. Left, went down to Mexico where his uncle lives. His uncle Rick had started the Northern Jaguar Reserve about 25 years earlier, which is several thousands of acres in the Sonoran Mountains just south of Arizona. It's the northernmost breeding ground of jaguars. So they were in Mexico, just sort of hanging out, drinking tequila. Macaulay's like, I like this tequila stuff. It's pretty good. And Rick was saying they need an endowment for this reserve. And this light bulb kind of went off. Well, I know the spirit space. You need an endowment. What if we created a brand specifically where our proceeds feed directly into the reserve? And that's kind of where the project was born. Alma del Jaguar means soul of the jaguar. And, at one time, the jaguar was the apex predator of, America, United States. So we work with borderland groups to make sure that there's wildlife corridors where, between Mexico and Arizona that these wildlife can actually go through. And so it's just about bringing awareness to something that folks might not necessarily think about all the time, but it's actually crucial. If you look at a map of like Mexico and Arizona, it's much more arid in Arizona and very lush in Mexico, just below the line, because there's a full ecosystem there. And so when you have an apex predator in that natural environment, it actually creates a more solid, general ecosystem. And so that's really the origin and ethos of the brand.
That's really cool. I know kind of food tourism and spirits tourism is big. People going to Kentucky and going on the Bourbon Trail, or going to tour the Guinness Brewery while they're, in the UK. Have you guys been able to use the reserve and kind of this core mission as a way for people to experience the brand a little bit more close up, to get to see these animals and to have like a real life experience with kind of the cause behind the brand?
It's certainly one of the things that we've been looking at. It's a very complex place to visit. It's like 14 hours on a dry riverbed. So our work has been primarily working with the scientists, working with the boots on the ground there, equipping them with trail cams and enough funding to get vehicles in and out, and to really monitor the cats that they're studying. And at some point, we absolutely want to start, maybe not necessarily like doing like tourism safaris type stuff, but bringing journalists, and sort of the media there to maybe help even elevate the story even more.
There's a lot of conservation that goes on inside of like the zoo ecosystem, down here in San Diego. A lot of people think the San Diego Zoo is a big amusement park, but it's actually the largest nature conservancy in the world. We've got, an incredibly diverse, group of species, and, a lot of endangered animals that are, at the zoo. And, at the zoo, a big component of going to the zoo these days is the hospitality. Like, you can stay overnight at the zoo, you can eat at the zoo, you can drink at the zoo now. Do you see opportunities with kind of, hospitality and conservation as like a natural touch point for the brand? Like, have you approached, kind of zoo slash nature conservancies that have like a physical footprint to potentially, get the brand inside of those points of sale? Seem like that would be a natural place to, be able to tell the story in an authentic way to consumers.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, we already are in some zoos and sort of, environments that are like that. And the truth is, it's a great place for a brand like Alma del Jaguar, because what's a better conversation starter than a drink? And naturally, there are some big players in that space that we're looking at and talking to. But at the end of the day, big hospitality is a very expensive, very complex, very multi-layered game to get into. And there's a lot of deep-pocketed relationships typically in place. And so the places where we have ended up have been because our cause is actually real. And the buyers or the general managers are able to get behind what we're doing in a real way, because what we're trying to do is extremely authentic. And so that's part of our plan for sure, is to also look at like, eco lodges all across the West, sort of like, low carbon footprint, places and hotels, and, all of that kind of environment is what we're trying to, where we want to put our brand. But, it just takes time. That's all about distribution network.
Yeah. I wanted to maybe spend a little bit of time at your time at Vibe. I remember seeing Vibe ads on YouTube. I must get marked as somebody in the ad industry or an entrepreneur or something like that. But I feel like Vibe was kind of one of the first CTV ad platforms that were advertising to like consumers through their own channels, kind of drinking their own Kool-Aid, for lack of a better word. It seemed like a big part of your acquisition strategy was to actually use CTV to advertise to potential small businesses or businesses that would be watching those ads, and then bring them into the platform for like self-serve media buying. How much did you have a hand in that strategy, and how much did you think about, using your own channel as the way to do customer acquisition?
Yeah, well, I had a big part of that. The original sort of plan there was like apps, like going after apps, which is cool. But that's a big, long game. You're typically pitching, engineers who either are or believe they're smarter than, whatever company is pitching them. And, my theory was, we were just looking at the US as a market. My theory was there are so many, wouldn't it be better to have 5 million smaller players than trying to have 50, huge accounts spending, 20 million a year? That's great. But, with this, we have a little more flexibility. So my sort of thought was like, who's advertising? This is replacing local TV advertising, right? So think about regional, things like that. So it's like law firms, car dealerships, real estate, insurance, roofing. So my original thought was like, those are the folks we need to target. Maybe they're dabbling a little bit in Meta, but this is actually a much more viable platform, because this is in an environment where someone's consuming media in a way that we're not consuming it, like on this.
Yeah, it's lean back, big screens,
and you can't skip it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't mute it. It's a very old school media in a new school way. And the founders and the team was really into that idea, and we used Vibe a lot. Actually, we used Vibe to prove that Vibe worked. I was in an ad, and like it lasted. Even after I left, I was getting texts from friends like, "I'm sick of seeing your face." And it was about simply reducing the barrier to entry into that media buying space. I mean, the closest competitor to us was Mountain, and it was like 15K minimum ad spend.
Wow,
and that doesn't sound like a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the global ad spends, but if you're a small bakery, or if you're if you're a car wash or something on a small regional level that's wasting money on Facebook trying to get foot traffic, ultimately having something like this is a much more compelling platform. You go all the way down to like $50 a day, and you can target specific zip codes, time of day, channels. And it was just a very it's a very good platform, and I highly recommend it to anybody out there.
Love it. I wonder, having been an agency founder and someone who led an agency for a long period of time, how does that go into your thinking these days, if and when you go out and look for agencies yourself? Do you have a different kind of lens in which you evaluate potentially partnering with agencies now, having been on the other side of it for a handful of years?
Oh yeah, there is. I learned after leaving my agency, and subsequently every role I was in, needing an agency. In fact, I just re-engaged my former business partner from Loda for Bear to support us at Morningside. There are a lot of untalented people that launch agencies, and they'll grab 5 to 10 grand, and they know it's not going to get renewed, and they're going to jump to the next project. There's, what I've learned to look out for are people that are busy. They've got long-term relationships with their clients, and they really that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for an initial large upfront payment. They'd rather have a annualized small retainer year one. Those are the things that I look for. Those are my green flags. There's quite a few red flags, and especially if you're looking for like design. I can't tell you the rash of portfolios that I've gotten and looked through that they're a bit painful, because I'm like, this is we're trying to build national brand standards, and I'm seeing stuff that's there's just no way. And some of the budgets I see, I'm just like, this is crazy. But certainly, being a former agency owner, I'm extraordinarily skeptical. Having had to sit across the table from clients for years and deliver high quality work and get grilled kind of over and over again. Certainly my expectations are high when working with an agency, which is why there's like one person on the planet I trust in that space, Michael Carpenter, and I just brought him back into the fold.
I love it. Having worked within bringing Vibe into the US, I think, I just came off the Possible show with a lot of AI companies and companies in the media and the marketing technology space that have built software, are kind of, building offerings, testing them out, and getting market traction in European markets. What's the biggest challenge and the hardest part for, B2B ad tech companies that have established themselves in their home market internationally or in, a different lower sized market, and then they're trying to enter the US? What are the things that you think that those brands need to take into consideration when deciding if and when they should try and join the US market?
I think it's two things. One is just the general market size. And oftentimes, especially if they're coming from Europe, they think we have to go to New York or LA, right? Or like San Francisco. If they're like super techy, they're like, we got to be in San Francisco or we got to be in New York. And, I've always said that's wrong. Particularly in ad tech. If I had an ad tech company in Europe and I was trying to move to the US, I would go to Chicago. Chicago's it's a great ad town. It's Midwest, so it's got a slightly more inclusive environment. It's an easier door to knock on. A great test market for sort of building that pitch and building that business, and then you can kind of expand, west and east from there. I think that's probably the first one, and then it's just generally like, what is the specific market that you're going after? I think you kind of have to really nail a single industry versus trying to be something for everybody. So it's either a very specific industry or a very specific audience. So that audience with Vibe was like small business owners, regional, right? So that's like a category that we can all kind of wrap our heads around. And, or it's like, med tech or whatever that specific vertical that you believe that your platform makes sense for initially is like hyper target that instead of trying to be something for everybody.
So, getting back to Morningstar, what do you see as one of the bigger challenges in launching a new spirits brand these days? There's obviously some headwinds in the global market of, young people and consumers drinking less alcohol, but then also there at the same time, there is this preference of wanting to align with brands that support their values and craft. And so I wonder, what are your kind of perspectives on the larger alcohol consumption landscape? But then how are you guys kind of punching above your weight class with this give back or this mission-based marketing?
So both Duck Club Bourbon and Alma del Jaguar have a give back component. And we do wetland conservation with Duck Club Bourbon, and we do Jaguar conservation with ADJ. And we build our brands, initially, like we're in traditional sort of blocking and tackling in the field, distributors, account visits, all that kind of stuff to really build the numbers. But also on the side, we're heavily focused on building brands online. That is where brands are built today. So, the discovery process is there, and then you have to couple that with campaigns within certain, DMAs, and then, kind of scale what you're doing within those markets across and then fill the gaps. There is a lot of buzz around like less alcohol consumption, with like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever. I'm a millennial. We got plenty to drink about. I'm not worried so much about, my generation and, Gen X, and Gen Z, their world's gonna come to, to need a drink too. It's the THC consumption is obviously very popular right now. But that, there's a certain age where that also becomes a bit tough on a daily basis. Like they will start to have children, they will start to have real jobs, they will start to have a mortgage, and like that will just add to like nervousness. And the alcohol industry is going to be there. And I'm not saying to overserve, but I'm saying that has traditionally been where alcohol consumption has been prevalent. But I also feel a sense of it's a bit sad in certain ways. I mean, think back to your early 20s. how many memories and great times you have going to the bar with your buddies, or friends or whatever. How many people did you meet? How many interesting conversations did you have? And, that not happening is scary and a little sad if, their entire worlds are just wrapped on communicating on, Snapchat and stuff. But I do believe that there's going to be a time where it kind of opens up a little bit, a certain age category, and maybe that's going to be in their 30s or whatever. But and like I said, as a millennial, there's a lot of us out there, and we got a lot to drink about, and we got plenty of years left.
I love it, and then also with the mission of like duck habitat restoration. Do you kind of naturally gravitate towards that affinity, like duck hunters and bird watchers? Is there like kind of a core affinity group that really cares about that as the mission, and because they maybe drink bourbon, but they identify as a sportsman, and I see the guys that are driving around with the Ducks Forever or whatever stickers on their cars and stuff like that. So, Ducks Unlimited. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I imagine there's some like very, easy tie-ins with, some of these other affinity groups or these types of activities that people do for recreation that kind of lend itself naturally to having a drink either before, after, or during. Is that part of what you guys are doing? Are you doing like an influencer strategy or?
So like, if you actually look at the bottle, I mean, so it was sort of really based on, old school Field and Stream 1950s.
That's cool.
Kind of branding. And, that obviously naturally that brand could have gone one extreme direction. But we wanted to be, very much, sort of that aspirational old school, bring up memories. We partnered with a major country singer, Riley Green, known as the Duck Man. He sort of famously says, I was just as famous for my duck hunting videos before I got famous for my country music. And, he's a total star, like selling on arenas. And so that partnership, grants us access to a whole market of his audience. And they're all outdoorsmen. It's, so if you really draw like a triangle, it's like duck hunting, bourbon drinking, and country music. We have this it's like this triangle, and you get dead center, dart. It's like very, it's a great addressable market. It's also a market that was not addressed. And, the bourbon market took a hit barrel price wise. So barrels that 5 years ago might have cost $5,000 or $6,000 right now are significantly cheaper. So we can actually go to market with a bottle that's extremely approachable. And, it's a drinking bourbon, but, if we had launched it 5 years ago, it'd been $120 a bottle. And so now the timing is sort of perfect for a brand like us. And we're rapidly growing. I don't know the data, but I would say we're probably the fastest whiskey launch, certainly of the last, short time, definitely the last several years. We're in over 20 states. We launched in November, which is the worst time of the year to launch a brand. We launched it at a huge fundraiser that Riley Green threw to open up duck hunting season in Arkansas, in front of 25,000 people. And it just skyrocketed. Since then, we've gotten calls from major chains that typically take multiple years, where you're pitching them and they say no, and then next year you pitch them again and they say no. And so it's been a very interesting project to work on, just to see the rapid scale of really having those three things kind of work for us. That sort of the bourbon drinker, the country music, and duck hunting. It's just the overlap is fascinating. The country music audience is so loyal, and it is such a well-built machine that integrating naturally into that has been a luxury as a marketer. I would say that.
I'd be curious, how did you guys go about? Did you kind of reverse engineer the brand based on the Jaguar concept? Like, is that an idea of like a portfolio that you want to do that like first identify kind of a cause that you want to align with, then find a celebrity or a creator that can be the intersection between that cause and that consumer? Is that going to be a repeatable process that you guys are looking to replicate, or did that just happen to be kind of the natural second evolution, like when you were thinking about launching a bourbon? Or I'd just be curious, how did you decide to, go from tequila to bourbon? Was it part of a longer strategy to replicate this as a brand studio, or did it
Yeah.
just kind of come up organically?
Yeah, we had this sort of plan in the pipe. We were going through iterations, and we got introduced to Riley's team, and he looked at it and he was like, I really want to be, this is the perfect thing. He'd been approached obviously several times. And then, we sort of finalized everything with him and his team. ADJ, the celebrity, is the Jaguar. Duck Club, this one happened in a very real and organic way. It just got introduced to him and said, hey, we got this project and, we'd love to have you involved. And he did. It was not sort of in the more traditional way. Naturally, it gets us very excited about future projects in that realm. But for us, it's got to be right. It's got to feel right. And I think there's a lot of brands that might try to force things, and if it's not authentic, it's not. Particularly with the duck hunting brand, like that audience can smell BS fast, and they're looking for it.
Yeah.
So whatever we do, we want to be cautious of that. And whoever we might work with or whatever projects might come down the pipe, we're going to be very cautious about what that, who that person is and what they're actually living. What is their life? What is their lifestyle? And, what is the product that makes sense within that? Instead of just like, hey, we got a vodka, like let's go after, like a major, A-list celebrity, and then it just becomes inauthentic. I mean, how many times have you seen these major movie stars, not going to name them, like pouring an espresso, right? They don't drink Nespresso in their house. It just doesn't, maybe the help, but not them. And so it just feels there's a lack of authenticity there. And so we want to be very strategic in what that looks like in the future. But yes, 100% building a portfolio that if we can identify the right cause, and building a brand that aligns well with that, it's a great recipe for success.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like you kind of operationalize the Riley relationship in a lot of different ways. I almost would guess, like, is he a partner in the brand? Like, does he have, that's what it felt like. It felt like it was so early that, he would have to have skin in it, in order to, want to be a part of that, but also align himself with it and just at your guys' stage. So he's an equity partner essentially.
Yeah. And he's an awesome partner. I mean, he lives the life, loves the bourbon, and he's an avid outdoorsman. And, that's just those three things combined. And he really wants to support this thing. And, when you have those things in play, that's just, again, it's just a massive recipe for success versus us trying to pull teeth to get, a photo shoot or to get an appearance or a mention, things like that. It's, from a marketing perspective, to have a partner that gets it, it is a very real luxury.
And it sounds like you're not just showing up like in his social feeds and doing like produced content with him. Like, he's identifying experiential opportunities where you can actually get the brand in the hand of the consumer that is around, this affinity for duck hunting. There's a lot of like IRL places for the brand to show up alongside him.
Oh yeah. Huge conferences, like massive conferences, actually. Then we hired a young guy to actually go on the road on Riley's tour this summer, who as a setup in the VIP section backstage. So all the folks that are invited to the show are experiencing our brand back there. We have bottles on stage during the show, and so there is this very natural integration into what he's doing, but not in like a forced or over the top way. It's just like a very natural, organic way of doing it. And so that's just getting us more real eyeballs on our brand. and it's helping. I mean, I'm seeing, spikes every day of what's going on. He wears our hat that I designed specifically for him because he likes this very specific hat, and we've sold tons of them on our site, and that's great because again, the proceeds are going back to good cause. The brand is growing, and when you show those types of numbers, we get larger distribution, and that's just, I mean, those are the things that we look for in our industry. Those are like the big green flags.
What's the give back model? Is it like a percentage of top line sales, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we do, a percentage and a lot of donation of product right now. There's fundraisers just all the time. So we've allocated a certain, percentage of product for donation, and there's some stuff in the pipe that is more cash direct that'll be coming out here soon. That's going to be a very strategic partnerships within that space that we'll be announcing.
I know you had a background in music marketing as well. Did that bring a unique set of skills in order to like really take a musician or a music partnership and kind of turbocharge that? It sounds like you really figured out a lot of ways to integrate into like touring. Like, is he showing up to big festivals where you guys can do like, satellite events and stuff like that, not just on his normal tour?
Yeah. So we did he was in Austin last weekend. We did a bottle signing there. He's in Atlanta coming up doing another bottle signing. So, kind of that's what's great about a musician is that they're on the road, versus like a movie star or something. When you're on the road, we can then look at, okay, markets that maybe normally wouldn't be served with something like this, we can then serve. We can do a signing in smaller markets, and that creates a lot of love for the brand, and not a top 3 DMA. And yeah, I mean, I think that's been very interesting to kind of watch. We did a bottle signing in Louisville, very successful. And you might not see that again with other celebrity brands. And I wouldn't necessarily call this a celebrity brand. I would just call it like, we have a really great partner who happens to be famous.
That's cool.
And yeah, but I certainly, kind of cutting my teeth in the music business, it's helped me have conversations with his team, and, I can kind of put my, head in their, feet in their shoes to a certain extent to understand like what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I know what it looks like, load in, load out, all the gear and all the, the entire team and production and all the real stuff where, like maybe traditionally a brand might not understand, like, hey, can you just come over here for like 3 hours and like do this thing? It's like, no, we have like 1 hour or like 45 minutes to like do this stuff. It's like the schedule has to be like very, very tight.
Yeah, you have to be unintrusive in his core business, which is making music and playing music for his fans.
For sure. And so it has to sort of naturally glide into his day. And so that's I would say there's been benefit to having my time in the music business for sure.
I love it. Are there I would imagine like duck hunting is probably a huge group of enthusiasts and like social media enthusiasm and content creator subculture that I've never quite dived into myself, but I imagine that's a pretty ripe ground for like scaling what you're doing with Riley on kind of a larger scale with a lot of individual smaller creators. Yeah. Have you been able to incorporate that into like a product seeding strategy or kind of bringing additional ambassadors into the ecosystem?
Yeah. So last year, kind of like I mentioned, we launched in November. We couldn't publicly launch anything until November 22nd, I think. And so we kind of missed duck season last year. It runs, from that time until kind of the end of the year. But right now we're actually, in the process of, reaching out to some folks and sending some care packages and talking to a lot of guides as well. And, duck hunting clubs, to get our bottles in there and certainly work. There's a lot of influencers in this space, just not just duck hunting, but, sort of any waterfowl, or just hunting in general. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I imagine you got quite a fertile ground to mine between music and hunting and outdoorsmanship and sports camping and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and it's a brand designed for them. I mean, it's like literally a brand specifically for those folks. And again, if it fits, we want to make it make sense. And my theory, it's very nerdy and I always go back to it, but every brand has a time slot throughout the day, and our brand has the perfect time slot. And so I can identify where our brand fits in a consumer's day or an influencer's day, but kind of understand like what kind of car do they drive, what kind of coffee do they drink in the morning, what might they eat for lunch, and then kind of look at that day, and then like we're at the end of the day, and then that creates really nice 360 view of kind of who we're talking to, and that helps us narrow down the influencer world as well.
I love it. Well, Joel, super exciting brands that you're building. Sounds like you've, found a really great model of kind of identifying these give back opportunities and launching spirits brands to fulfill a real need. And more importantly, finding, the right partners and the right megaphones in order to, bring awareness to those causes and leverage the brand in an authentic way that helps build affinity and really create long-standing impact for these partnerships that you're making. Fascinating conversation, fascinating background. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with the audience today. If folks want to try some of your products or learn more, where would you like to send folks to study up and maybe try and find a location where they can get it in their hand and try it out on the road or at their favorite restaurant or bar or something like that?
Yeah, so we've got interactive maps on both duckclubbourbon.com and almadeljaguar.com. So you can find it, put in a zip code, you can find it near you. Yeah, and it was a great conversation. Much appreciated the invitation, and this was fun.
Awesome, man. And for everybody at home, if this is the first time you're watching the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, a honest review is how we find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there's a duck hunting enthusiast or an outdoorsman or somebody that just loves country music or loves the conversation that I had with Joel today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a great afternoon. Thanks for coming on and sharing a little bit of your insight with us.